Good evening to all of you once again from Studio INHAF. Today, October 17th, we have the second in the series that has been collated, put together by Water Environs and EdN, or Educated Environments. Let me start with a brief note on what this sub-series on cities and lakes is about, and well, of course, fundamentally about INHAF itself. Yesterday, we had a sort of overview on lakes and cities and what responsibilities who could be taking as stakeholders go. And I will be offering you a short gist of what happened yesterday and the inspiring ideas and perspectives that came about. Today is on, as you know, it's on positioning urban waters. And Tuesday, we have a third one, and that is titled Making Cities Water Secure. Well, a little about INHAF itself. This is the 24th webinar in the series called Rethinking Cities. And it has offered us a wealth of insights that are now archived. You can find them at inhaf.org. We had also the Gandhi and Cities series, the first of which is done, and we have two more to go. Again, you know, in each of these, we have had some very, very lovely speakers, thinkers, people who have been doing things and who have shared experiences of a kind that is rare, especially for those who are of the younger generation present here at these webinars. And now we have, at this Water Ecologies and Cities series, Ajay Nayak, and he put this together with Kimaya Kiliskar, Vikram Pawar, and Shireen Sheikh, who are all present here. And what is important is that they have thoughtfully strung together a formidable set of about 20 leaders in the water space who will speak to you all. Yesterday, some 5 or 6 of them spoke to all of us. And today we have, as you know, as many here. And it's nice to know that there is a decent blend of gender. We have 1, 2, 3 women, and well, you know, 2 others are men. And that's important because, you know, the gender perspective is often lost in all of these things. Even yesterday, we had 4 speakers who were women. So what has the Rethinking Cities series sought to accomplish with this unprecedented number of speakers, over 125 of them on the last count as I did yesterday, and over 24 webinars until yesterday. Today is the 25th. Now, what have they sought to accomplish? INHAF's effort to develop interventions at the national, regional, state, and local levels is not something I want to dwell upon just now. You will find more about it on the website. By happy coincidence, as Kirtibhai reminded us yesterday, Ajay Nayak is somebody who has been with us for quite some time. I know him well for about 20 years now. Kirtibhai knows him probably for a slightly longer time. And constantly I have seen with him that he is someone who is looking at what you can do as public concerns go. As an editor, as a journalist first, and then after that, in this new avatar that he has taken in the last, say, 3 or is it 4 years, where he has decided, okay, I've done enough to report change, as I was saying yesterday, and that I will see what I can do to bring change. And between these 2 organizations, which are partner institutions for INHAF today, he is bringing, I think, a very interesting dimension of community perspectives and community insights and participation. Participation is a word that the government doesn't accept too easily. And as we saw yesterday, the one thing that seems to stand out is, in all of these things, the absence, the conspicuous absence of the government in many of these discussions that we have. In fact, Kirtibhai and I have discussed this several times in the last few weeks as to how we need to be getting officers from the government to be participating in these discussions. Well, we haven't succeeded so far. Well, a quick word on City URI, which has been focusing on urban renewal initiatives. It is led by a host of urban thinkers, planners, and practitioners. The intent at City URI is to respond to urban challenges with efficiency, productivity, inclusion, and all the rest of those values we aspire, you and I aspire for at the city level. This is not obviously easy for INHAF or for any of us as partner institutions or people who have been driving such vision and value. Reassessing India's urban challenge, rethinking Indian cities, formulating or reformulating, shall we say, response in the context of national development challenges. All of these are part of City URI. as people who are leading institutions yourselves, you might want to know more about what we do at INHAF beyond the webinar series itself and how we can collaborate. You don't collaborate, you collapse, as they say these days. And it's important for us to work together to see how we can achieve these things. And I extend this invitation to all of those attendees. Many of you are discerning leaders and opinion makers. I request you also to see how you can join us at INHAF in order to see that we are able to push these frontiers and acquire new dimensions to the way we look at India and in urban India, and see what we can do to aid and support these planning processes for the next 2 decades. Post-COVID, from mid-June, when Studio INHAF launched this outreach series of webinars, we have touched about 20,000 people as cumulative participants. I'm really heartwarmed by the fact that there has been so much participation. Thank you all for being here. Many of you are people who have been with us in previous sessions too. We have brought in 100 speakers from India, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, the United States, and many countries from Europe. This would not have been possible without the support and active working of professionals from these 40 partner institutions, including, of course, the Eden and Water Environs, that have done whatever they could to bring these people together. We have had webinars where we have had people from Canada, from Chicago, from Washington, D.C., somebody from the Philippines, someone from Seoul in South Korea, and of course, people from India. Amazing, between 3 or 4 time zones and such. We need discerning professionals to be participating. It's not necessary that we have large numbers. Today, again, we have just exceeded about 100, but I know that typically we get about 200 people who are participating in such things. What is important is not the number. What is important is that, as Kirtibai keeps saying, that we build this constituency, that we deepen the constituency. This articulation at Studio INHAF on the Rethinking Cities series has been very diverse, very rich. And this series on water and cities, or water ecologies and cities, clearly adds greater depth and breadth. Many of you young professionals, millennials and Gen Zers who are tuned in today are our hope of carrying the basic value premise, not our thoughts, not the subject, not the topics. It is the value premise that you need to carry and see what you will do with it as you shape India's destiny and your own careers and trajectories into the future. Questions that stay in our mind at the end of every such discussion are, how do we get bureaucrats and ministers to see what appears to be obvious to people like you and I? How do we live with the fact that government projects cost often twice as much as any good private sector initiative does? Why is it that governments cannot understand the need to work on, to focus on environment and on natural ecosystems first? How do we stop this brutality of public expenditure and listen to professionals and citizens who are impacted on the ground? How do we get governments to move from supply side solutions to demand side management, whether it's water or energy or waste management or whatever? What are these tools we need today, I mean, in these times, shall we say, to rally public support and galvanize public imagination? Ajay Nayak is one such person who has been galvanizing community action. We will hear from him on how far he has come in this crusade of his with a wonderful team that he has put together in these 2 organizations that he now represents. Urban water and rivers as a subject has immense potential to touch every heart and mind, as I said yesterday too, and as Kirtibai wrote in a mail, was it yesterday in the morning. And it is more potent than, the issues of poverty and slums and such. I'm sure this series will help bring more insights for those of you who are looking to bring action on the ground in your own cities, wherever you live. My last set of notes are these. I would say that yesterday what we heard was in effect the following. Cities and urban areas are of central importance for sustainable development, both as dominating sites of production and consumption and as context for developing new, more sustainable practices. All cities depend on large import of water and energy. These resource flows are closely linked to global and regional sustainability issues, resource scarcity, pollution, competition for land and water, as well as local health, environmental and distributed issues. Issues of this kind are all common to each of these challenges that we have. How resources are consumed and managed in the expanding cities have strong implications for the regional resource flows and related pressures that each of our cities have in different scales of impact. We heard yesterday, for instance, that water resources management needs bottom-up alternatives. And I'm sure that Ajay and the rest of the speakers today will also bring such perspectives. How do we make them holistic? How do we bring in participatory styles of environmental governance? These are concerns that will come about. And well, of course, how do we avoid, as someone said yesterday, the tragic consequences we are seeing around us? How do we translate these into pluralistic debates and strong attempts to fundamentally change the provincial policy style of governments or of bureaucrats for addressing threats of various kinds, energy or water or on waste, for instance. Yesterday, someone talked about how officials feel threatened, and I'm sure you have had similar experiences. Maybe you will speak differently or you will offer another dimension to that. Today, in no city do we have a policy network that includes watersheds, for example. Instead of forcing watershed-based governance structures, the exploration and examination of more creative and flexible ways of linking watershed imperatives to existing socially and politically meaningful scales should be explored by all of us who are working on water at such city levels. Well, there are solutions at the micro level, shall we say. There are people who are doing such things today where, 600,000 liters in an apartment of freshwater demand is reduced by as much as 85 to 90% with systems and technologies that ensure that you use your own water. And you know how Singapore and China took to new water in just the last 10 or 12 years and have ensured that such water positive balances are set. So India has to see how it goes beyond what it is doing today. The last one for all of you, ladies and gentlemen out there as attendees, keep this in mind as you listen to these speakers. 78% of global annual water availability today rests in just the two Americas and in Europe. And they consume less than 20% annually of such water availability. What is galling is that Asia has 9% availability, annual water availability, and our annual use exceeds 65%. How do we get this stark truth known to all people? That is scary enough for people like us. How can it become for the rest of them out there? Thanks to all of you speakers for making time today and for you as attendees. My last note, and I'm sure Ajay will remind you at the end of this session, Tuesday at 5 p.m., we have the third edition of the Water Ecologies and Cities series. Please mark it on your calendar. Thank you so much for listening to me this far. Ajay, Nayak, it's your floor now. And I wish you the very best as you get us more learning today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hari.
Yes.
Thank you, Hari. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can I request all the other speakers to shut their video in order to get better bandwidth while Ajay is speaking, and each speaker, when he or she is speaking, ensure that the video is switched on. Thank you.
Thank you again, Hari, and thank you, INHAF, Kirtiji and Neeta, for inviting us to curate and host it. At Water Environs, for us, it has conversation always started with how do we make space for water ecologies, and that's what we founded about 10 years back. Yeah, in yesterday's session, which was all about how do we make place for the water ecologies, one of the questions Hari asked was, why not? How did it start for us? So I thought as a lead up to today, we would just share a brief on how has it been a journey for us and how is it regulated, which is a reflection of many other cities that's really been happening. So when we talk about water ecologies, be it wetlands, that is rivers, lakes, ponds in our cities, which are increasingly becoming a backyard. And that's what it started for us. Three friends, we just as architects, conservationists and media guys, we just thought, how do we really create space for water? We just started mapping the city and discovered that when we knew there were 4 rivers in Bombay, when we asked most of our fellow citizens, Mumbaikars, they always said rivers in Mumbai, except for Mithi, nobody knew. So this entire urban disconnection is what we really wanted to explore and see what is it that we bring to the table and understand where are we really going as cities? For example, every time we talk the word nala, which in the colloquial word would be a freshwater ecosystem in a traditional language, became nala was literally a gutter. So how do we really look at the perception of a river in a city. And that's what the journey started for us, with perceptions. Those perceptions became presentations for us at Kala Ghoda, at the BMW Guggenheim Lab. We started really just asking the question, what about the rivers or water ecologies in the city? Soon the perception, the presentations became, for Kime and Vikram, who are my colleagues and who are academicians at Kamla Raheja, they started doing the studios. So it goes back to the question, what is it as we as architects, urban planners are really doing or can do for water ecologies? Are we disconnecting them with our riverfront developments, etc.? So that's what the entire equation, it starts at the studio level, and that's what we started doing within the parameters of what action we could do. Soon that became a participative thing. We realized as architects and designers how limited the space we were really affecting in our little silo of our industry. And the participation came with the media background, with friends. It came with Hindustan Time. We organized a cleanup drive, which was the first time that we really realized the momentum that a community could bring on board. There were early morning walkers by the river of the Dhaisar were actually they formed a collective called the River March. With them, we did the cleanup drive, and the entire momentum that a citizen got when they came as a collective was what participation for us became. The collective grew over the years to become River March, which the month of March, the city marched for the 4 rivers. And every year it has been gaining momentum with more and more people joining in. It became a march for the city, march for the river, and gave a voice to the entire direction for it, which resulted in an exhibition at Maharashtra Nature Park called Rivers. And it was unique in the sense that it got together not just an exhibition of architecture or a model which shared the urban scape. It had on board the gathering. There were dhobis, there were tavela walas, there were corporators, all on one platform discussing how they were affecting or giving voice to what was happening to the river. That exhibition gave momentum to really go across the city, share narratives, not just what was the surface, what was seen in the on the urban map, also what was below the terrain, dried up wells or gauthans, which were still trying to maintain those wells. So we were really looking at narratives which was still maintaining the pristine state of the water within the national park, which Bombay is blessed with, where we had even the indigenous communities who are still the caretakers, where it's still pristine, the water. The narrative was carried forward. The exhibition became the tool for a common citizen to really talk to the city, where we had elders beyond age groups. It was in the sense that it was included kids, teachers, everyone to become a champion for the river. And that was the intent, and it kept growing. And there were installations that we developed, which was a voice for the river, which talked about what a citizen could do for it. It became studios that we conducted for different architecture and urban planning academies, where we actually took the student or the master's and bachelor student into the river. They had never, this particular college, it had a river flowing behind it, but they had never visited it. For the first time, we really had they were seeing and reflecting on what is the narrative they really are creating, not development as a design or a approach which is about development of a waterfront, but giving a voice for the ecology itself and for the dependence that it is. And the one question we always asked was, how would you talk to the local, not in a design language, but in the local language? And those were it was also a learning curve for us as we went. All this while, whenever there was a concrete wall being built on the edge of a river, Vikram would run, or it was Kimia going with the BMC professionals talking about hydrology on the edge of Nidhi. So it was constantly an effort where we were talking about our professional lives, but also as citizens. The River March led to a meeting with the local corporator. As the numbers grew, the CM's attention, then Mr. Fadnavis, the ex-CM, we had a session with him, which led to the BMC finally raising 3 RFPs, which finally mentioned the ecological development of the river. So hence, it was a great win, but it was a win that needed constant work, which is continuing because there's very little change that's happened. So one realization that has happened for us since in the last decade is of platforms. Be it INHAF, which supported us, it has been our mentor and has kept pushing us in whatever activities we've been doing. be it our institutes that we belong to, or our academicians or professionals at, or River March, which was a public body that existed. It is all platforms that really encouraged and kept pushing us to. There have been days that we said that, okay, why don't we go back to our professional lives? And that's what our families say. But then, yes, they have been the push that we've had. But also at the same time, what has happened was the SEED project by FES India, which talked about how do we get together urban transformative change to really happen. And it really made us sit around the table and address, when we can stop talking a common language where we have all allies are together, ecologists, architects, urban planners, but talk, if a transformation is really needed, how do we see what is the overall integrated look? Whose river is it? How do we really address the change to happen from a perspective of everybody, every citizen? And I think that's when the change making really started for us, and the understanding of platforms for possibilities. When Manvi and Anurag keep pushing us at FES India that, you know, you have to get the pulse of the citizen, look at other inspiration points. We've been looking at parallel cities or activations which have been happening there. And that's what led to the session yesterday, where we really have been happening. We saw the lakes and wells in Bengaluru and Delhi. We saw rivers in Nasik, where the deconcretization actually happened. And we finally have what we call the river Vishwamitri in Baroda, where we actually saw the change happening, where they stopped the waterfront development from really happening. So it is a platform that can be really created and change making to happen, which everyone can benefit from. So we were looking at consistent platforms of possibilities, which is where we come today to today's session, where we are having panelists who have been really part of institutions or individuals who have created platforms on ground and online for the narrative of the water. Water in a city, water as an ecology that needs to be established. Yesterday in the session, I will quote Rajni Bakshi and Rohini Nilekhani were quoted when they said that what is required is Samaj, Sarkar or Bazaar. There has to be a meeting point of the industries, locals, the citizen, and the entire movement of the governance movement. Today, our first session will talk about exactly that, how a city can bring change with every stakeholder in mind. Then we have a voice, that is the anti-Kochi competition that was organized and the entire movement of a city, where we have Sahil and we have Dr. Rajan. I will introduce him again. Then we have Shailaja Deshpande from Jeevitnadi, Pune, who will be talking about entire movement of keeping persistent movement of the citizen and professionals in the city. Then we have Dr. Sara Ahmed, who is really talking about an online platform for the voice of the river, or not the river, just the river, the water, the Living Water Museum. And finally, we have Gurmeet Rai, who is really going to talk about nature and culture coming together. And each panelist will be presenting in sequence. What we try to keep is INHAF is organized in the chat, all the backgrounders to be read for you to read in detail about our speakers today. But I will give just short contextual introductions to them. So we're starting with the, as I mentioned, Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. How do we integrate? The city of Kochi came up with the anti-Kochi, I wouldn't call it a competition, but a movement literally, where the Kochi city in Kerala came up with a multidisciplinary approach, where the world saw as an architectural competition. It had a background of a series of workshops, programs that really led to it. And today we have to share this journey. We have Sahil Sasidharan, an urban practitioner come researcher, working as a technical expert with GIZ on the sustainable urban development of smart cities, SUDSC. And with him we have Dr. Rajan Chedambath, who's a director of Center for Heritage, Environment and Development, c-hed, Kochi Municipal Corporation. Essentially, every time we've invited somebody, we've said that it is a team that is behind it. And unfortunately, we can't have the entire team. But when I spoke to Sahil, he said it is a government and an institution approach, and we should have both sides of the story to be shared. So I would like to invite Sahil and Dr. Rajan to take over this stage right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Thanks a lot for that wonderful introduction. And also, I think a lot of my tasks, you have reduced it now because you've actually spoken about a lot of things that I was anyways going to share. So thank you for that. And I think our presentation really fits perfectly right after this experience of reverse that you have done in Maharashtra, because from there in Kochi, we have tried to pick up some of those processes and move forward. So if all of you can see my screen, then I will just begin my presentation with three opening points. The first is that we are quite very unique in this presentation because we are not urban water experts or people who are coming from the water background. At least I am not. I will not speak for Dr. Rajan. This is a joint presentation, as Ajay already mentioned, between Dr. Rajan and myself. We will be presenting it in two parts, but we are a much larger team. If I were to just talk about the team, we would be at least 15 team members. If I were to add the jury of the urban design competition, that would add another 9 members, highly esteemed from all over the world, India, and also the local, the city of Kochi. Then if I were to add the winning teams, that would make it another 20 members on board. So what I'm trying to say is that what Dr. Rajan and I are going to present today is a team effort. We call it Team Ende Kochi. And Ende Kochi in Malayalam, the local language here in Kerala, means my Kochi. Ende meaning my, and Kochi being the city. What we are trying to present today is an experience, a process, and as Ajay already mentioned, a platform for possibilities. The second thing that I want to clarify is that why are we not coming from the space of water? Because Ajay mentioned that it's really important to speak to the local. I would like to add that it's also very important to listen to the local. And that's where this presentation begins from. If you look at the city of Kochi, I don't need to tell you, it's all about water. It's the hydrogeography of the city and its urban geography, which really set the context of the work that we do. And Dr. Rajan will explain a lot more about the city's relationship with water. Since he's a resident of Kochi, I would let him take that role. My job instead would be to explain what kind of an approach we took. And there comes the third point. Thank you, Ajay, for introducing me as an urban researcher come practitioner. I think that is a very fundamental aspect of my identity. Every few years in my career, I switch between the worlds of research, academics, and practice, because I am a fundamental believer that it's only when we traverse these worlds, we are able to find meaningful ways forward, especially in the quagmire of urban development in the global south, a region where different development paradigms, like say India, prevail. So with that, let me introduce you to the site of this wonderful competition process. It's the Mulasheri Canal. Let me tell you something about the canal. It's 1.3 kilometers long, and to reach that canal, to identify it as our site, in 2019, from January to June, we had to go through a participatory phase, which is called Ende Kochi. Ende Kochi was a multi-stakeholder participatory planning set of multi-stakeholder participatory planning activities. And the idea was to really explain what kind of a project the Sustainable Urban Development Smart Cities project of GIZ could do in collaboration by supporting Kochi Municipal Corporation in the city, and at the same time learn back from this process to understand what the city really required. So the most interesting aspect of Ende Kochi was that it was not a participatory planning activity that followed a plan. It was the other way around. It was a series of participatory planning and visioning activities that were done across the city. And Dr. Rajan will speak a little bit more about it. In 2019, in order to reach an understanding, a somewhat holistic understanding of the city and its needs. And that's how we arrived at the blue-green infrastructure and a focus on Mulasheri Canal. Then the process moved on to a series of defining the scope of the work that we could do under the architecture of the project. Here I will also take a minute to talk about the Sustainable Urban Development Smart Cities project. As you know, I'm a technical expert with GIZ, which is part of the Indo-German bilateral cooperation. Sustainable Urban Development Smart Cities project is a project that is in cooperation with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs at the national level, 3 state governments, and corresponding 3 smart cities, one of them being Kochi. And in Kochi, we anchor ourselves with the Kochi Municipal Corporation, the local body that basically delivers this project. And that's how we are connected to the work that Dr. Rajan brings in. When we tried to support this Ende Kochi phase 1, and then we or phase 0, then we moved into phase 1, identifying what kind of support would be possible. Finally, we zeroed in on a design competition and we went into this stage of detailing it out. And again, all of that, Dr. Rajan will explain in a much more detailed manner. What I really need to share with you is the partners. Like I said, really big team. We have the municipal corporation, which anchors the process, and the Center for Heritage, Environment and Development, which is led by Dr. Rajan as the director. And the chairperson is the mayor of Kochi. This organization, in collaboration with KMC, supports this process with GIZ. And GIZ in turn brings on board a wonderful consortium of an international planning firm from Germany, from Hamburg, Germany, Urbanista, and a national firm, Herbs, which is a participatory collective from Dharavi, Mumbai. And from Kochi, we have Design Combined, an established architecture practice in the city. And all 3 come together to really help develop this process. Again, back to the location. So Mulasheri Canal, it's a 1.3 kilometer long canal in the city. It has a lot of history, but it also is the center or the backbone of the flooding in the city. It's located right in the central business district, which is also why it was chosen, because it was such an important location for the city. And then we decided to take an approach where we address flood mitigation and climate change responsiveness through this process. We also try to rethink the waste management systems. All of these images are from Kochi. We try to integrate sustainable low-income housing. This is a settlement right beside the canal on the western end of the canal, which merges in the backwater. In the next slide, that'll be more clear. We also look at how can we also improve mobility and walkability in the city using this canal as a thoroughfare along the canal, which already exists. It's called the Mulasheri Canal Road. We also think about public place-making questions in the city, and we take an ecological approach. We really aim to think of water management strategies, maybe traditional, innovative, that can hope to socio-ecologically restore and rejuvenate the canal. And finally, but this is actually one of the most important pillars, because all of this has to be negotiated through an inclusive public participation process. And therein comes the socio-economic sensitivity to street vendors, to hawkers, to gender marginalized people, to people with disabilities, a spectrum of inclusion that we wanted to include in this process and also learn from this process. As you can see, this is the crux of the urban design competition location, the site. We divided it into 3 parts. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide is the backwater, which flows into the sea. If you're familiar with Kochi, then this is referred to as mainland Kochi or Ernakulam. And here you have the canal flowing. It's barely visible within C. It turns within C site, subside C. Then moves to subside B, where it intersects with the Mahatma Gandhi Road, which is the main commercial thoroughfare. And the central business district is located between these areas, B and C. It moves further into subsite A, where you have the Kerala State Road Transport Corporation site. And this is also a very important place where this canal goes and merges with the Perandur Canal, and then further merges with the Tevra Perandur, which is the longest canal in the city, almost 40 kilometers in length. And this also becomes a hub of flooding because there's a railway line, which you can see with the yellow line. There's a railway line right beside the bus terminus. And that's the crux of why water is central to what we were trying to do. This is my last slide. I will speak on the objectives of this process and then hand over to Dr. Rajan. We wanted to start with a crowdsourcing process. We wanted to crowdsource because we felt that a collaboration with the private sector is crucial to bringing in knowledge. And I think Mr. Hari was also mentioning the same thing, that there are different skills, strengths, and knowledges that each actor brings into the urban development space. And we felt that one of the best ways to do this was to crowdsource through an urban design competition. But it had to be scalable. The canal was crucial because Kochi is full of canals. Any solution that the Mulasheri Canal could see could be scaled up and could also be upscaled in other cities of India. That's what we believe, and that's what we tried to do. The second aspect was we focused on local needs. We felt that these were the most important. We ensured that they were multi-sectoral, the whole approach. We looked at all sectors, as you have already seen in my challenges and opportunities slide. Lastly, we wanted the process to be incremental and adaptive. And this, I think, is very important. As a researcher, and here is where I put on the academician's hat also. As a researcher, it's crucial to understand cities in India, they develop incrementally. And what we need to respond is an adaptive approach, a flexible approach. And that can only be done if we have something like a conceptual idea that we at least I call the urban assemblages, something that I've borrowed from the theoretical framing. And that's something that we tried to follow with the next step. We focused on participatory development. We focused on connecting all stakeholders that we could think of, that we had access through Dr. Rajan. A lot of that was facilitated, but obviously there are varied sets of target groups that we engaged with in this process. We focused on persons with disabilities, gender marginalized groups. We really wanted to address the city's challenges, looking at all of the spectrum of stakeholders. And we also ensured we involved academia and others, because the jury, the 9-member jury, it had academicians, practitioners. It was chaired by Professor K.T. Ravindran and an esteemed urban designer himself. And the idea was to really bring in different knowledges to bridge technical, community level, and institutional gaps. This was crucial for us. And then finally, something again that I will pick up from what Hari had mentioned. In India, urban development sees a lot of implementation challenges. Either their projects are too expensive or they just stop. And there's a lot of academic literature, research literature in this space. So from the day one, our focus was that we will focus on implementability. We will ensure that every day we strategize in order to make our efforts implementable. And there we chose a phase-wise approach, as you've already seen. We decided to tap existing fundings as far as possible first. And then we ensured that if local buy-in is there, the process will see the light of the day. And that's what we are basing ourselves on. Over to you, Dr. Rajan. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sahil, and I'm sure you can hear me. You all can hear me. I will just set the context right for this the entire Kochi project. You should know, like over the years, how we really ignored the most essential part of living in our planning endeavors. We always ignored air. We always ignored water. We always ignored soil, and we also ignored food. And this Mulasheri Canal is a perfect example, a clear testimony to the fact that, like, we never bothered about all these 4 critical elements in our planning. Our cities, our urban centers grew without any planning, without really without giving importance to the most critical aspect of sustainable living or livability. Having said this, I'll just go to this. I think there's very little time left, so I'll briefly introduce this institution, Center for Heritage, Environment and Development. Is a special purpose vehicle established by the Kochi Municipal Corporation almost 20 years back to support the municipal corporation in technical, as far as technical aspects are concerned, knowledge networks are concerned, and the funding aspects are concerned, and international and national networks are concerned. So we work a little away from, or differently from the normal local government institutions. We really support the municipal corporation in areas where they are not really really have expertise in. And coming to the Enter Kochi competition, like we started this whole journey, as Sahil said, way back in 2019 January. And when we began this Enter Kochi project process, like we never knew what was the project we were going to do. Sort of like, what are we going to really zero in the kind of project. So we had like, initially we had discussions with the councillors, the political leadership, the decision makers. Then we went and talked to all the technical partners like Indian Institute of Urban Designers, Indian Institute of Architects, like Institution of Engineers, geographers, academic institutions, and all of them. And then we also said it's very important to engage the citizen. Like you just talk to the people, like what they, because Kerala is known for its bottom-up approach as far as planning is concerned. We had like initiated this People's Plan campaign long back in 90s. So like we've decided to go to the public. We had a kind of consultation with almost all ward sabhas, the local level units, like, and finally we kind of came up with around 50 projects. Like all this citizen engagement kind of told us that we have like this 50 important project that we go to do immediately. But then as part of this Enter Kochi competition, like we couldn't take up all that 50 projects. So, and then we wanted to kind of zero in this one or two projects among these 50. That was a very difficult task, because when we looked at these 50 projects, again, all of them were equally important. All of them were like concerning some critical aspects of the city living, like air, water, or soil, or food, or whatever. We didn't know what to take and what to ignore, or omit, sort of a thing. And there, like we again went to the stakeholders, like we again discussed with everyone. We kind of talked to the political leadership, the council. We kind of talked to the people who've been working in Kochi for long, and in all these aspects. And then like we came to this conclusion that like Kochi Municipal Corporation, then there is this institution called, on transport is concerned, we have Kochi Metro Rail Limited, then we have Smart City Project, and then we have Kudumbashree, Residents Welfare Association, universities, professional, and a lot of all these people, a lot of people we have talked to, and they all said like canals are the lifeline of Kochi. You have been ignoring water for long. It's the time that you get back to water. It's time that you do focus on water, and we don't make use of this project, give emphasis on water aspect, like so why don't you really take up canal? And for us, like canals are like basically what we do normally we kind of clean the canals every year. We remove the soil, and then again, like you have deposition next year. So nothing really happens as far as the quality of the canals are concerned. And you see heavy encroachment on the canals. Like we have almost 48 kilometers of waterfront, and all of them are like encroached upon by the most powerful people in the city, because they can manufacture consent, in the sense like the moment we go against their interest, and they will manufacture opinion, they will use the media to kind of fight the project. So we have to tread very cautiously. It was a knee deep wade through, like mud and slush sort of a situation. And then we said, like, let's not go majorly into bringing the size and shape of the canal back, but like, making life easy and life beautiful around these canals. Like not just the canal, like, but living and people around this canal, like, let us devise some projects, like, design some project that would improve the livability of the people and sort of the region. And we kind of, like, for doing that, like, it's not like you go and help one particular consultant and they come and tell you, like, what should be there. And as far as this canal is concerned, though, we took creative idea from n number of people, not just from government, not from the citizen, all the institutions, professionals, like and people who've been working in urban sector for years together. So we brought all of them together to discuss on this particular aspect. And it was for the first time that we kind of had such wide range of discussion with almost every section of the stakeholders, including Kudumbashree members. Kudumbashree is like the women self-help groups, like they basically engage in, like, waste management and sort of things, like so even we got them into this process and kind of discuss with them, like, what should be there and what not to be there. And like kind of, and then we came to an idea, then we prepared a design brief kind of a thing, like, this using this design brief, we kind of invited, we started this whole competition, like, we wanted to give opportunity not just to the professional organizations, like, big consultancy firms, but even students and professors and teachers, whoever in the field, like, let all of them come and prepare a beautiful design for this 1.3 kilometer critical canal water source of the city. So that was a beautiful process. Like, we have got almost 117 entries, and all these 100 entries had, like, some kind of beautiful elements, like, something which we really need to do as far as ecology is concerned, environment is concerned, hydrology is concerned, like livability is concerned, history is concerned, and livelihood is concerned. And it was very difficult for us to kind of omit one of these 117 projects. So we had a jury. A jury is not like a very highly academic and practitioners, but we even had members of Residents Association. And normally members of Residents Association sit back and criticize. They don't really collaborate with us. They say municipal corporation is not doing this. They'll always find fault with. They don't really, like, come up with suggestions,
Dr.
or
Rajan,
they don't collaborate.
So
this project we have taken as a case study for collaborating the critics, and all of them, like, joined us, and we had two of them, the stakeholder community, the most vociferous of critics of the municipal corporation were part of this jury. And we have kind of selected, like, 20 out of this 117, like, we selected around 21 entries first. Then we shortlisted 9 out of them. Then again 5, and now we have 3 entries. And this is one of the entries we shortlisted 3 entries, like, and it has taken care of. It has become a model for us. We have like, many other canals, and if we can have a model for the a model program, a design for one canal, we can kind of emulate that. We can replicate that in all other canals, and these ideas are well received by the media people, and they all own it. Now it has become such a thing that the council, the political leadership cannot do away with it. They will have to somehow implement it, because it generated so much of interest, and people say, like, we were part of this particular project, and now it has to be implemented, and now it's become mandatory for them to implement. And it is a very intelligent move, like, people create projects, people own the project, and finally political leadership is forced to kind of implement the kind of project.
Dr. Rajan,
and now,
I'm
like,
sorry, I have to
with
interrupt
all
here.
these selected entries, we are going to prepare detailed project reports. We are going to show the people, like, all these 21 selected entries, and it's going to be a big movement. And I'm sure, like, this is going to be one of these project where, like, people prepare their projects, and people kind of help raise the fund for the project, and finally the people implement the kind of project. So in a way, it's a model project, not just for water or canals, but for the way you implement projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. I'm sure to make the changes happen in a city, it's a long process, and thank you for sharing it. unfortunately, we ran out of time there, and we are running a little behind schedule, but I'm sure we will catch up. There were two presenters. So I think, but it is what it did for us to say, what will it take to have integrated change happen? And I think those are the series of layers, and the process will take time. And that was the showcase of Anticoche has done exactly that. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So please use the Q&A, not the chat, but the Q&A board to put down your questions for Dr. Rajan and Sahil there, which they will answer subsequently. We'll cover at the end later, but also please keep putting your questions. It comes down to the next question. That was, how does a city change? But how do you as a citizen make the change happen? Our next speaker is a designer. Because of a love for environment, decided to also take up study botany, take courses on water, and is Shailaja Deshpande, who is the founder and director for the Jeevitnadi, Pune, the Living River Foundation. She has gone through, she also organized the Kisan exhibitions, a series of personal journeys which have led to something later where she has been working for the last decade in activating the city in terms of working with architecture colleges, working with citizen movement, working with being on board citizen committees, for example, the Ramnadi Restoration Committee. She's been increasingly being awarded, but I will not talk her journey. I invite Shailaja Deshpande to share her journey herself. Please.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, INHAF and Eden Water and Water Environs for giving this opportunity to us. I'm just trying to share the screen. It's taking a while. Just give me a few minutes, please.
Shailaji, may I suggest that you start speaking till it loads up?
Yes, yes. Okay, okay. I will do that. And I think I am able to share the screen. This is going to be, I would say that we are Jeevitnadi Living River Foundation, where we are the citizens. And today I'm going to be basically speaking about our journey towards how we started this community participation program and how we tried to inculcate, understand. So this is going to be a little journey which I will be sharing with you. So please, all of you, keep it in mind. This is not going to be very much technical, but which a common person, commonest of the common person would understand what the rivers or the water means. So first of all, when we started working on the rivers, we realized that first we need to understand and we need to simplify what are our rivers. Then we came to know that we have very little knowledge of our rivers. Every river has a different temperament. Now for people who are listening, for Pune, we have 5 rivers and every river is different from the other river. She is governed by her flows and her floods. She is a living entity just like us, like you and me. So any stereotype model which you design is not going to be working, because she is a different person altogether, and every person behaves differently, gets treated differently. So the issues here are multi-level and multi-dimensional. And this was another awakening for us when we started working on the rivers, that outside Pune city, on the upstreams, the rivers look absolutely pristine and clean. And the moment they enter into the city, they are different. So ecologically, we knew what are the reasons, but how do you communicate this to the common people? That they knew that the rivers look different as soon as they enter the Pune city was a shock itself when we started talking about it to the citizens. But then we also need to also convey this message in a very simplified manner, rather than talking about her morphology or ecological processes or the strata or the climate change, because commonest of the common person doesn't understand this. But he understands floods. He understands when during the summers the water is scarce, and he also understands the water quality, because they suffer. Everybody suffers from waterborne diseases and everything. Now, understanding Pune, also when it comes to the surface water, is our water safe? Pune city is one of the most flood prone city because of the morphology and the structure, that within the periphery of 65 kilometers, we have heaviest rainfall to the rain shadow areas. We have chain of dams just away from Pune city, about 10 to 15 to 20 kilometers away. We have chain of dams, and we have sub watersheds, more than 6 sub watersheds within Pune city after the catchment area. And we are having lot of developmental projects like riverfronts and metros and all other. What is their subsurface? How do I communicate to the commonest of the common people that there are shallow aquifers and deep aquifers? No, they will not understand, but they will understand if we have 12 TMC from surface water and 5 TMC is getting extracted into the Pune city through groundwater, and we are going to have a shortage very soon. This is the language they would understand. So, and they look at the rivers, they know that there is a huge water hyacinth green carpet on the rivers, there is a foam which comes on the rivers, so they understand about the water quality. Now, how do I go about it explaining this, that what is wrong with the river? So we realize that we need to have a scientific and holistic approach towards it. And when we say that we have 5 rivers, chain of dams and multiple watersheds into the city, it has to be some sort of a river district, which is very easy for the people to understand that we need room for the river. We should start learning to accept the water. So in policy planning and implementation, the same thing needs to be incorporated. Now, how do I go about it? People do not know anything about the RRZ policy, but we realize that we do not have a definition of urban water or a rural zone, or the administrative zone is correlating with the river zones, whether it is a scarp zone or spur zone or pediment zone or riverbank zone. This is very simplified, but there is nothing in the policy. Planning, we do not have anything about security, safety, and water quality. Enforcement, again, the same thing. So then our learning was, rather than that, we should understand stakeholders. So what are our stakeholders? So we very broadly divided them into 3 categories. Primary stakeholders who are directly dependent on the waters. They could be fishermen, agriculture, cattle breeders, or anybody. Secondary, like you, me, and everybody who actually take the dam water, which is a river water, but they do not understand that the river is giving them the water. And the government bodies who are actually into creating policies, they are all secondary stakeholders. And tertiary, who are having a commercial interest. It could be builders, real estate, or major developmental projects where the economy or the money is into the interest. So when we started separating the stakeholders, it was easy for us to, categorize them. That primary stakeholders are very small in numbers, their voices will not be reached. And they need support. They need support in multiple ways, and we need to be with them consistently to give them some sort of a support in some way or the other, which I will be answering to you in the question answer session, how we connected with the primary stakeholders. And with little funds as an organization, we could connect with the primary stakeholders. This was our primary understanding for the primary stakeholders. About secondary stakeholders, the number is huge. So huge amount of awareness is required. We need to have very specific and planned programs to reach out to these secondary stakeholders. We will need more bandwidth, we will need more funds. And tertiary stakeholders, we kept it aside because they were powerful, though they are in small numbers. We thought that we should not be right now working on them, but we will focus on primary and secondary. So bottom to top approach, and with bright green, which is more sustainable. If you change the secondary stakeholders, they could be a part of the system. Then we created one very simple exercise into all public places. We used to hold the boards into our hands. I love my mutha, or I love my mura. What about you? And out of 10 people, 9 people actually approached us, and they used to start, talking profusely about the rivers, how they used to be in their childhood days and all that. And then we realized that it's not the disconnection which is there, which is happening with the urbanites. They are not indifferent to their rivers, but they wish to do something, but they don't know how to go about it, how to start, whether I go alone or I go in a group, how do I take out time, and all these were the questions in their minds. So our simple thing happened that before that we need to create lot of data, documentation, some scientific facts, some groundwater facts, the water quality facts, which we can simplify, make them into a very, very simple language which every person can understand, a 4-year-old can understand, and an 80-year-old can understand in any cross section of a society. And this needs awareness strategy and actionable programs. So we created some verticals for that, where we started a river festival on the India River Day. We started mobile exhibitions on the river, which are portable exhibitions. Then there are river walks which happen every Saturday, Sunday, which is 1.5 hours walk, where we start from the ancient history to the current scenario into the river walk. Then adopt a stretch of a river is another program, because as I said, we have 5 rivers and 44 kilometers into two banks, which is 88 kilometers. So every region and every area can have a river along in a very close vicinity of their place of work or place where they stay. So that becomes easier. And we started creating events by the river. And we also started having a clean river concept, that how we can clean the rivers right from our homes. So these are the awareness programs which I just spoke to you about, that river walks, story of a river is a mobile exhibition, events by the river, and toxin-free lifestyle. Toxin-free lifestyle, I just have to create this one slide, because during the COVID days, everybody suddenly started realizing the type of immunity, impact of chemicals, and the water quality, the air quality, and then it was easy for us to get oriented with this, and we launched this program, Take the Challenge. Do you want to clean the rivers right staying at your own home? So we started the orientation programs, then we created online workshops, then DIY type recipes are put up on our websites, and small documentaries which we created, that you can clean your river right from your own home by changing your lifestyle. Now we do not just name it as a sustainable lifestyle, because sustainable has become a very, very common word, but cleaning the river from home becomes very, very agreeable to the people. And this program, for last 3, 4, 5 months, we have been really running these orientation programs of clean my river from my own homes. So then the events, we did street plays, participatory painting, music, and all other things. And the actionable programs happened with the wetland creations, wetland formation, then geo monitoring with portable small units where the children could participate, and composting on different stretches. Then we also started nature walks, which is on the website, which is a now virtual nature walk. You can click on the walk and you get to know about the riparian zones, the wetlands, the flora and the fauna, and all ecological processes. Then composting and cleanup is another thing which we did. And lastly, but not the least, we realized that people started coming closer to the river. And this is what we wanted, that throughout the year, if you start bringing people some way or the other closer to the river, they start understanding the river, they start understanding the ecosystem, and the participation goes much more simpler. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shailaja ji. Thank you for sticking to the time on dot. Thank you also for sharing how does one as a citizen make change happen. And it's in good continuation that it's not only the responsibility of this governance system, but also how do you fit into the governance system. So thank you for that. From the citizen, we move on to a larger platform, which is a global platform, which is what our next speaker would talk about. And we have Dr. Sara Ahmed, who is the background of, who's an environmental sociologist and an academician in Ahmedabad who has been working with, on various portfolios of water, food security, and climate change. With that background, she launched something called the Living Waters Museum, which is an online museum which constantly collects and curates narratives on water and heritage in India, but is also part of the global system which she builds. A little more background. Sara has been instrumental in the, anyone activating Delhi should be a hats off to them. So she has been instrumental in activating the Jal Board to get various narratives from around the country to address, and also look at when she was talking online, but they were talking actually on ground. But a narrative can make change happen. And I think that's what we all should believe in. I hand it over to Sara now to take it forward. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ajay, for the introduction. I'm just trying to activate my screen. Sorry, I'm having a little issue with the screen being activated.
Should we start playing it from the INHAF screen?
Is it not, it's not showing, right? It was showing earlier. Okay, now.
Okay, it's come on.
Now it is, yeah. Right. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ajay. So we're not, as you just said a few words about me, we are really working more in this virtual space. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what water museums are and what we're doing here in India. I think we all have talked a little bit about the challenges that we're facing within India and globally around water security issues. And that really means thinking a bit about a new ethical framework for water. What does water mean for different users and different users? And all around the world, all over the world, there are a number of water museums. I mean, I think when I started, the word water museum was quite new in India, about in 2017. And the word virtual museum was even more strange to people, though of course now we find ourselves working in this virtual world. And I think at a larger level, what the water museums are trying to do is also trying to connect with young people through hands-on exhibitions, science, and the arts. So in 2017, we came together in Venice to launch the global network of water museums with the help of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrology Program, IHP. And the idea of developing a global network was to facilitate collaboration, to facilitate content sharing, to bring on board the kind of tremendous artists that work around issues of water and climate change, to kind of support new museums that were coming up as well, and to initiate communication campaigns. So what we did last year with young children around the world, asking them to visualize the water that they want. And we're launching our second campaign soon. And so, we'll keep you posted on that. So when we launched the movement, we developed a global charter for what water ethics means for all of us around issues of justice and sustainability and inclusion, and basically calling upon people to take aboard urgent actions for not only ourselves, but all the flora and fauna that depend on our waters. So this we did in the canals in Venice, and we had the Tribunal of Water from Valencia, which goes back to the Moorish times in Valencia, and of course it's all men who judge, but they resolve water conflicts, and they came to Venice and they helped us launch the water charter from a boat. So, as I said earlier, we were recognized in 2018 by UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrology Program as a special initiative towards SDG 6, but we're also touching upon many other SDGs, including the one on partnerships. And there is no such thing as what is a blueprint for a water museum. We encompass many different types of water museums. There are open air ones, there are museums on waterways, there are museums around water infrastructure, there are museums around steam engines, around fountains, around sluice gates, and they can be called interpretation centers as well. We have brought into the global network a number of representatives from indigenous communities, particularly in America and Canada. What we're trying to reach out to more indigenous communities and their voices, because we do believe that an ethical framework on water has to be rooted in spirituality, in respect for our waters as well. And that really, I think if you've read the work and the words of people from the indigenous communities, this comes across very strongly. So around the same time that I got involved with the global network, I also was thinking about and visualizing a water museum in India. And to me, the concept of a physical museum, though it was very romantic to think about how could we build a museum in a stepwell. And I looked around and I said, what is the content? Where is the content for building a museum? Because we often think of museums as places of arts and artifacts. So I said, let's start with developing a visual repository and let's work with young people. That was my commitment to Living Waters, that somehow we engage young people. Currently, we're based at Ahmedabad University at the Center for Heritage Management, and we work with students and interns and researchers and also various people across the country. I think the 3 C's kind of defines our approach: collaboration, curation, and communication. And I'll talk a little bit about that in some of the work that we're doing right now around urban water ecologies. And it is, since we work in the virtual world, it's an infinite world. We're not bounded by 4 walls of a museum. And I think globally also there is a lot of rethinking about what museums are, particularly in the current context. We have a very interdisciplinary approach to water, which looks at issues of inclusion, equity, and gender. I mean, that's the role that I play when I mentor young people in content development. And we've done a number of things in partnerships with physical museums, with cafes, with schools, with heritage sites. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. When I started, and because of all my years of work in the development sector around water as an academic, as an activist, and a policy advocate, I didn't just want the museum to be a dead thing. In fact, many people asked me, why have you got the word museum with living waters? Because typically we think of museums as dark and dusty places. But I was thinking also along those lines of how can a museum motivate social change and action on the ground. So right now we're not in that phase, but when I run through the slides, you'll see how much we are doing. We really are actually really in the phase of building the content, building the repository as it is, because without that, you can't really talk about change happening. So our website is there. It's a beta site right now. It's going through some changes. We launched it in May on International Museum Day. And it's got a number of galleries that talk about different stories around water. It's got videos, it's got blogs. We're also hosting a lot of music on YouTube as well, water music, and you can look at that later in your own time. So the site is being tested. Hopefully it should be fixed very soon. So I'm just going to run through some of the urban ecology work that we've been doing, and I don't think I have a lot of time. One of our students looked at the lakes in Bangalore and how they were affected by effluents and discharge and all, and she's done a really very nice animation film, but it also helped her as a visual design student, helped her really think about water, and this is her words, Priyanka's words over there. I won't read them right now. We've got a project going on for the last 2 years looking at step wells. So we all know what step wells are. And many times in Ahmedabad, at least, there are step wells in your backyard, which which a community doesn't always know that it's there. So there's a lot of beautiful work around step wells, coffee table books, etc., but it doesn't really come back to communities and local people. So we've been working in documenting some of these step wells, creating virtual tours of them. We worked on a map, an interactive map of the step wells, but we're now moving from that to develop more of an interactive exhibition that also looks at how step wells were built around sources of water, groundwater, or a spring. And in many parts of the state, there have been efforts by NGOs such as Samarth in Kutch to revive step wells. There are, I think, experiments and things in places like Jodhpur around adaptive reuse, creating a step well cafe, not in a step well, but near a step well, and working with private corporate sector partners to develop that kind of space. So that's some work that it's ongoing. We also had a student working on interactive map fiction, so bringing the underground world alive to young people. We are looking at how we can design this as a more interactive visual resource. So the story is about a young girl in search for water, falling down into a well and figuring out that there's a whole world underground where there are conflicts between rural and urban areas because water is being extracted up by these taps that you see in the picture, sucking the water up from reservoirs to the urban centers and all, and how this girl negotiates her way out of the step well then through that process, and that's what the game is all about. So that's still being worked on. We've been doing quite a bit of work along the Sabarmati, visualizing that. We had a young girl intern working with us on a short film that we were able to show in China a couple of years ago at a place now synonymous with the coronavirus. We've taken our students, so I teach at the university. I've helped design a water studio for all new students joining the university. So that's every year, almost 900 students. And we've taken them to see the impact of the urban waterfront, riverfront work on communities such as the washermen and the new campus, and then getting them to interact with them and trying to understand issues and access to water. I won't go too much into all of this because this is not on urban rivers, but just to also talk about other things that we've been doing with other museums like the Vishala and Vichar Museum, and I see you online, so I'm not going to talk about that. You can see all of this work online because I think it's important to talk about gender and water issues, and this is some things that we have been doing with our global partners as well. It's not only about talking about the issues, but it's also talking about the joy of water. And we've done that through music. We've interacted with children with special needs. These are our students at the university, but also young people in critical conversations around water. This is again work we've done with kids. So a lot of outreach events that happened till last year at least, before the pandemic came and stopped us doing these things, but really taking children in villages like Ambapur to understand their step well over there, taking children to the heritage site of Sarkej Rosa. And these are children from minority-dominated, predominantly minority schools, which don't get that opportunity. So doing some of that work in storytelling and so on. And finally, the project that we've just launched in Mumbai with multiple partners to look at from water heritage to issues of access to water and health and public health. And we're working towards a virtual exhibition that we want to launch in March 21, which would mark 1 year of the pandemic and the lockdown, when, as you know, we all talked about hand washing and access to water, etc. So I would stop at this. Oh wait, I have one more slide. But I wanted to say that around this multi-stakeholder partnership, we would really, really welcome help and contributors, particularly if you're interested in contributing towards the exhibition that we're planning. It will be a largely virtual exhibition, but with some scope for pop-up things around that. So Ajay has been pushing me to think about impacts, and I just wanted to end with this slide, Ajay, that what have we been doing? It's all about building this ethical framework, looking at issues of inclusion, but also looking at water not just as a resource, but at the aesthetic value of water, and helping young people to think about that aesthetic value to respect water. And I mean, I think when you work in the virtual space, you can look at some numbers in terms of outreach, at least how many visitors to your site. The global network, we do measure, I mean, we do, you know, look at visitors through ticket sales, etc. And the last count I know was 5 million people. So that's a lot in terms of outreach that we can do. And I think finally, I want to say that visualization and communication and all is only one part of the equation in looking at behavioral change, looking at advocacy, and really talking about empathy with our waters. That's it. Ajay.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you very much. One might ask why online now, but the question what we are trying to address on this platform is how do we build a movement? How do you get the interest on water going? And how do we really push it? I think we have a lot of questions that may be coming up on various minds. I again request the audience to put in the Q&A box the questions. I also now request the speakers to look at the Q&A box to see if anything particular is addressed to them, which they can answer individually. And we'll address the discussion for more larger generic questions which may arise. So please do look at the Q&A. So thank you, Sara. We would look forward to a conversation on how the place of an online museum for the water dialogue to happen. But from that's a futuristic approach. I also will look at how do we look at the past for the future. Our next speaker, Gurmeet Rai. She's it would read as one of the first generation conservationists in India. She is a director of Cultural Resource Conservation Initiative India Private Limited. She's a vice president Cosmos India. She's an expert and voting member of ICOMOS. Movement building is also, I think it's not only about your practice, but it's also about how do you carry much of the people in your community, in your industry forward. And heritage is one of them. So I'm really looking forward to hear Gurmeet talk about how nature and culture and heritage come together for the future. So over to Gurmeet Rai. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Is my screen visible? Oops.
Yes, very much.
Okay.
You just need to go on full screen mode.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to this wonderful forum. And it's a delight because as a heritage practitioner, it gives me an opportunity to think about water a few inches deeper than where we are as practitioners. So what I'm going to do is basically share with you about water as heritage. And this is something which is very alive and vibrant in the heritage sector, where even to an extent that even the terminologies are being considered, being thought about. Is it water and heritage or is it water heritage? So when I present, I'd like, in fact, views of panelists on the matter in maybe at this forum or at a later date. So integrating the past for the present of water. As a practitioner, my understanding of the subject is that historic cities reveal an intrinsic relationship between community, cultural practices, and urban form. When we look at the cultural heritage practice in the country, in India, the 100-year legacy that India has in the area of heritage management, where we started with archaeological sites. We went to defining heritage as heritage of national significance protected by the Archaeological Survey of India, and sites of regional significance protected and looked after by state governments. It is shocking to see that we are still with about 4,000 sites which are protected by ASI and about a similar number protected by the state, or maybe a little bit more, but that is our bandwidth in terms of protection. So because of this, not recognizing practices and nature, which is the colonial instruments, the tools that we work with, hence there's a vast disconnect between cultural and natural resources in terms of their protection and management within the domain of heritage practice. My personal experience as a heritage practitioner is that there is need to recognize local knowledge systems and integrate in the planning and development processes. This is nothing new. This is something which speakers before me have also spoken about. I take this opportunity to share with you a few cities that I've had the opportunity to work with, where this particular relationship of nature, culture, and cultural practices completely jump at you. You really have to be blind or deaf or kind of challenged to not be able to see these particular layers. For instance, in the town of Puri, which I had the opportunity to work with, Puri, as you know, is right on the seafront, on the Bay of Bengal. And what you see here is this large shunk that has been created because mythology and the historical or the cultural references is that the whole city is in the form of a shunk, and therefore a Shankashetra it's called. The heart of which is Sri Jagannath temple, and the grand road called the Baradanda. So apologies for my pronunciation. At the end of that particular the road, on which annually you have the Rath Yatra, at the end of the road you have the Gundicha temple. What you also see here is this river, the Musa River, and you also notice that the river is truncated. You also see a lot of these blue dots, which are the pokharis or the ponds in the city. Those of you who are familiar with the city or with the town of Puri would also know that Puri has sweet water. And in spite of being so close to the sea, it has sweet water as groundwater for drinking purposes, which is fast depleting. Around heritage, what you see here in red is locations of jagaghars and the mutts and the temples. And these are the cultural institutions around Sri Jagannath, and the natural features, which is the pokharis and the water tanks, are part of that particular landscape within those cultural institutions. And this is what a jagaghar would look like. Jagaghars are institutions. They provided kind of a line of protection for the temple of Jagannath temple. And these jagaghars have ponds, and you have these membership of communities, and they use this for, they have their deity is Hanuman, and they do a lot of kasrat and so on, but it's also a cultural institution. Bauli such as this is the Bauli Mutt in Puri, which is associated with Guru Nanak, his visit there, and you have sweet water, and this is just about, say, about half a kilometer from Bay of Bengal. You also have these designated areas, two of these zones, which are called sweet water zones in Puri, which are protected through law because these are the areas that it has been identified, then one is that there should be no development on that, because so as to create, provide open areas for water percolation to recharge the groundwater. Looking at another city here is a city of Srinagar. And you see this 20th century, early 20th century map where the red part is the old city, which is called the downtown, and it's on the banks of River Jhelum. And to the northeast, what you see is a whole range of water bodies, which is the Dal Lake, the Nagin Lake, and the whole system, the water system. And you see all these streams from the mountain, the Zabarwan mountains, that come into the Dal Lake. You also see on the eastern edge is a series of these Mughal gardens, which were built by the Mughal kings on the edge of the Dal. On the right-hand side, you see an embroidered shawl by produced in the 19th century, the patronage of the Dogra kings. And this shows the cultural landscape of Srinagar with you can't see it very clearly here, but it actually has the Dal Lake, it has the Jhelum River, it has all these Mughal gardens and the life in the water systems as captured by the artists. Today, you kind of experience the same relationship, which is the culture and nature coexistence, and a whole food and culture and nature not as just as a practice which, one kind of thinks about as a periphery thing. You see how it is closely linked to existence itself, the entire food security of the valley in the times of snow, when the valley gets cut off from the rest of, mainland India. You actually have all these vegetables and all that which have grown in the Dal Lake, which are then dried and kept in the houses, and that kind of takes them through the winters. What you see at the bottom, these little green areas, is actually how you have these floating gardens on which these vegetables are grown, which is a cultural practice. The Mughal gardens, which I've already mentioned to you. But what is happening today, if you were to look at the master plan of Srinagar, you see that this large red arrow I placed here is just to show that how the relationship between the water bodies is truncated, is because of the nature of urban development that has happened over the years. And unfortunately, it is the wastewater from all this extended urbanization that has been finding its way into the water bodies and choking it. Unfortunately, to be able to now address the water system, what is thought out is that the most vulnerable communities are the ones that get removed from their practices in order to protect the water system. So when you look at the master plan, you see that the Dal is shown without any kind of habitation in terms of any kind of living practices or hamlets in the water. Whereas if you look at the satellite image today, you see all this green area. Now, I'm not advocating that the habitat needs to grow, but unfortunately in the master planning, it is these living practices of the communities of doing these floating gardens and doing the vegetables, living in these water systems, which is being removed. So it's not that I'm not saying that one side is holier than the other, but between managing encroachment and continuity of living practices, there is a balance which is required. So unfortunately, when master planning gets done by people like us, we kind of wish the most vulnerable away, which unfortunately is what depletes which makes societies unstable, unhappy, and creates, conflict, at the risk of, using strong words here. Master planning also does things like this. For instance, the river Jhelum was the front. This is where the city was facing in earlier times when the city was formed. Water transport was an intrinsic part of commuting. But when you look at master planning and our people like us, when we do our planning for these cities, especially when you come from the plains and you're working in the mountains, you kind of are insensitive to what does this river mean? What are the strategies that are necessary for keeping the river very much part of the lives of the people? Because local people, the economically weaker section, I would say, still use the river for commuting. Or on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, you will think of tourists using the river. But in terms of mainstream practices, these kind of activities get removed. Opportunities. I have all my life worked with government projects because I do believe that to be able to make a difference, it's very important that our work is embedded in government processes, because good management is anchored in good governance. And unfortunately, I also see that while projects and programs, some project gets done well, but for some reason, it does not find its way into legal reform. And it's the institutional and the legal reform is what is critical to sustain or to take the learnings from a good project or a good program forward. So I've had the good opportunity to work on under 2 programs or part of 2 programs where we've been able to touch water in the last 5 years. One is a program by the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, under their Swadesh Darshan scheme, and the other is program of Hriday by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And it's important to recognize that out of the 100 smart cities that have been identified, which are under development, under this cities under this particular program, 38 of them actually have identified their historic core as areas for area-based development. And I mean, I was very encouraged to see NT Kochi being so creative and the smart city program being so innovative on this particular front. So central to the whole process in heritage management, where we need to look at, where we look at nature and culture together, is the community. So we are all saying the same thing. It's like, but the point is, how do you engage with them? How do you recognize them? And how do you understand their knowledge systems and translate it into the planning and development paradigm while they are active participants in the entire process is the need of the hour. So what I consider that the little snapshot that I have done with the city of Puri, the town of Puri and Srinagar, is that understanding the cultural and natural heritage of the community is critical. Their values, their practices, and their vulnerabilities. Because it is not just about what is important that needs to be protected. It's also to understand where are these communities, how are they vulnerable, or the areas of their vulnerabilities, to see that we can mitigate that through our planning processes, because that's how we will generate goodwill. Where we learned this, where I was able to test this out to some extent as part of a larger team undertaking this work under the Hriday program, was in the city of Amritsar and Puri. In the case of, now under the Hriday program, there are 12 cities that were identified, where Hriday stands for its heritage. It's about it's about historic cities and rejuvenating them through infrastructure augmentation, and that's where the acronym somehow comes. HRIDA stands for something like that. I'm sorry, I've forgotten. This program was launched in 2015 and closed in 2019. Amritsar and Puri being 2 out of the 12 cities. Now, the first thing that we tried to do is to understand that what is the outstanding universal value of that particular city. What is its culture? What is its import? Where do you embed its tangible heritage? And that's where we thought that it is embedded in the values attributed to the Golden Temple, inside, which sits right in the heart of the walled city of Amritsar. So it's literally, I mean, and it is a point from where Amritsar actually was founded and grew. And then within the center of the Golden Temple is the Holy Book. And within the poetry, you see this, which says, Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Dhart Mahat Divas Rath Doi Daya Khele Sagal Jagat. So which means air is the guru, water is the father, and earth is the great mother of all. So recognizing water as central to the whole thing, to the whole understanding of the cultural nuances. So we kind of identified what are the areas of work that we should be doing when we get inspired by a site of significance like that. And we developed a whole framework of intervention related to cultural heritage and natural heritage. And what you see in these images is about water and about the first zone that we identified, which is the historic city, the walled city of Amritsar. In the case of Puri, we identified 3 heritage zones. Shankashetra Heritage Zone for the revival of the Pokharis and the Jagaghars, the River Musa Environmental Zone, where we wanted to draw the attention of the local government on what that need to revive the course of the river Musa, which is critical for stormwater management, to say the least. And Banki Mohan seafront, and we called it the Balukhand recreational zone, which is the seafront. So the learning from this particular project was that stakeholder engagement, recognizing the local community is critical, which is not part of our urban development processes in terms of mainstream processes. Training and capacity building is necessary at all levels. Collaborative action between the community, heritage practitioners, city managers, and the scientific community. I would like to draw the attention to the water specialists is that even as an architect, when I'm looking for solutions to manage water, whether it's rainwater harvesting, whether it is about wastewater management on a side or working on the edge of a water body, I am having great difficulty in finding scientific community to work with me, even to access knowledge, to be able to say, okay, this is the brick and mortar intervention to be able to get it right. And lastly, institutional reform to enable interdisciplinary work, building of partnerships and engagement of community, and to sustain the nature of project and program. So this is kind of critical as part of governance model. We are now engaged with the Ministry on a program funded by Ministry of Tourism, Government of India under the Swadesh Darshan scheme. And we have picked up the theme called Heritage Circuit for Srinagar, Verinag, Achabal and Verinag along the course of River Jhelum in the Kashmir Valley. And we call it the Waters of Kashmir, Heritage Spaces and Living Culture. And we've identified 4 precincts to intervene in the city of Srinagar, which is right on the edge of the water body, because we do believe that in terms of all the kind of contamination and that is happening to the water or the communities that live on these water edges, that it is very critical to engage with them if we were to actually want to make a difference to the health of the water body.
Gurmeet, I'll have to step in here.
Yeah, so I was going to, can I take about 3 minutes? Is that possible? Just to round it up.
20 minutes of the session left. So, I would say just wrap up with the general comment on the slide.
Okay, so I was going to say that while my learning has been at the local level, the support has come for these kind of projects from the national government. Why? Because tourism and cultural heritage is actually state subjects. So is urban development. So Government of India creates conditions, creates programs for you to test it out in the local governments and state governments. State governments is where we need to work and engage. And at the international level is where we kind of learn things to bring onto the national platform. So referring to ICOMOS, this is something which I would like to flag here at this particular forum, that there are 3 bodies which are advisory bodies to UNESCO: ICOMOS, IUCN, and ICROM. ICOMOS works in cultural heritage, IUCN works in natural heritage, and ICROM does training and capacity building, to say the least. And ICOMOS has, in recent past, it's out of Paris, the headquarters, and we have national chapters, so there's an India ICOMOS. The areas of work which have been identified at the global platform for focus aligned with the SDGs is nature and culture connecting practice, it's heritage and climate action, and rights-based approaches in heritage management. And the 4th platform is water and heritage. But I would say that all the other 3 areas of work, nature and connecting practice, climate action, and rights, all of them converge on the platform of water and heritage because there is a sense of urgency in this particular area, and we must address it with communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gurmeet. Thank you for positioning the place of cultural and natural heritage in the critical domain of water. I would like to request all the panelists to come on board, come on view again. Please put on your screens so that we could start the discussion forum. There have been comments and various replies from panelists all going on in the Q&A segment. And what I would like to position the different sessions today with one of the predominant questions I see there is on the smartness of smart cities. because what the place of water in a smart city is what I would throw you all, because all of you have addressed the city in various dynamics. How do you position water in a city on and various mediums? So I would like to place a question on dialogue here is what has been your experience and how do we manage the place of water in the smart city using the different media that you have used to position water? Sahil, may I invite you to go with it first, considering that's your subject area? And MT Kochi.
Thought that maybe it's best that others first take this. However, I can definitely respond. So it's a challenge, Ajay, and I'll explain why. The Smart Cities mission is, the pros of the mission are that it's an integrated mission. So unlike say Swachh Bharat or the other urban missions, PMAY urban, etc., the focus is not sectoral, it's integrated. And what that means is if you can get the conversation on board, that conversation can really influence the process. You know, you can really build in a cycle of implementation. So that's the advantage. However, why is it not easy is because the Smart Cities mission is again a centrally driven mission. There is a special purpose vehicle architecture, which is a bit complex to work with urban local governments, especially political setups. So there is a lot of local urban politics that needs to be navigated through. And it's a set of constraints that all cities in the Smart Cities project are facing. And that's something that really has to be navigated through. And that's where I think the beauty of the Endekochi process, you know, even though there are many questions in the process that are still open, as you know, it's all ongoing at the moment. But one of the interesting things is that even the ministry has shown interest, you know, from the Smart Cities side. So what's happening now is that the concept of local buy-in, the concept of inclusion at the bottom, it's really trying to drive conversations around why Endekochi is already not a part of, you know, a smart city mission, and how can it be made part of that. So those kind of different configurations, and that's when I mentioned the urban assemblage approach, you know, where we don't know the outcome, but we keep putting together potential possibilities, you know, and catalyze action. So that's the approach that I would argue that, you know, would best suit given the complexities on the ground. But it's very contextual. Every city is different. Thank you.
Any of the other panelists would like to go? How have their experiences been with the smart city movement? Is smart sometimes being sensitive, and how do you localize it?
Can I answer? As per
Please.
the experience, yes. What in Pune we have experienced so far while planning for the smart city, we seem to be lacking with two things about the resilience of the city with the given natural resources which they are, which seem to be lacking while planning to incorporate those resources in a way where they could have a sustainable future for the smart city planning. And somewhere I see a total lack towards the scientific research which has been already there. The data for Pune, we have the aquifers data, the groundwater data, we have surface water data, we have climate change research which has been done by different NGOs, but we seem that this is not getting incorporated. So the science and technology, unless and until have joined hands, I think it, I don't know how the direction of the smart cities would go, or in which direction. It will definitely not go towards the sustainability.
Any other views, Gurmeet or Sara?
See, because, like I said, that I've been looking at some of the smart city projects, and I've unfortunately, most people are, you know, when the scheme was actually launched, most of, I think the city is considered smartness as use of technology. And information technology, using of equipment and all that became kind of the focus area. Managing their natural resources better, community engagement. I don't think in terms of more sustainable cities, looking at behavior change towards resource management, all of these things were not high on agenda. And in fact, most people also prefer greenfield projects. They're not even interested in brownfield projects. They don't want to go into historic areas or old cities and kind of find their way out and do what we understand as conservative surgeries that you improve the quality of life for the marginalized and all that. Unfortunately, it's like, and you asked them this, it's also about utilizing money. The kind of work we are talking about doesn't need big money, it needs small money, but big time. And so there are a whole lot of, I guess, challenges of that nature.
Dr. Rajan has just joined in. So, Dr. Rajan, from a government perspective, my question to you would be, how do you really get in the sensitivity of all the portfolios that you are responsible for onto a smart city board? Dr. Rajan, I don't know whether you can hear me. Dr. Rajan? I think his audio is off.
Yeah, let me just check with him. Just give me a second.
Yeah. Sara, in the meanwhile, can I come to you?
Yes, but not on that question, Ajay, because we
don't.
No,
I'm not coming. Someone has asked the relevance of an online vehicle like the Living Water Museum. What can it do for a movement building or a platform for water ecologies? And that is, for example, everybody ties it so much to the ground. A river flows, touches the context of heritage, of people, communities. How do you really place the position of an online water museum for water ecologies in a city?
So the fact that we're a virtual museum, allows us to coordinate many different activities and be a hub for that. So when you look, for example, at the Venice Water Museum, there is no water museum in Venice, but it's a network of 38 or 40 different sites which all come together to form the Venice Water Museum. And it's all on a virtual space, but there are actual physical sites where there are different things happening, the history of navigation, fountains and the meaning of that, etc. So when I started Living Waters, that was somewhat behind my mind, that we could have a networked approach, that we could have hubs and like a hub and spoke model, that we are working with academic institutions, not just in Ahmedabad, but in other urban centers, and really bringing this kind of awareness around water, this ethical framework that I talked about, because there are many universities in India now which are running master's programs on water, right? There are many artists associated with some of those programs. For example, at Shiv Nadir University, there are artists who are part of the water program there. So I think that is the space where I see a new understanding, new perspective building around urban ecologies. If that answers your question, Ajay, sorry.
Ajay, I think you're on mute. Meanwhile, I'll just quickly update Dr. Rajan's audio. There was some issue, but now he's able to hear the question. So I've conveyed it to him. Ajay, maybe you can offer him a chance to answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Rajan, being holding the portfolio of the government here on this panel, the question was, how do you remain sensitive?
I think I cannot hear you properly, but then I hope you hear me.
I can hear you. I hope all can hear him.
Yeah, okay, fine. I think this question regarding smart cities, actually, when we prepared the smart city plan, they did not come up with anything new. All the existing project, all our list in our budget, annual budgets, they've taken all that into the smart city scheme. And smart city as such, we have a new company called Smart Mission Limited. They haven't kind of come up with any new projects. They were trying to incorporate all those ideas, project ideas that we have in the city into the smart city scheme of things. And like even now this Antagochi thing, like for the implementation part, I don't know whether we can, because smart city is going to come to an end, but we can put it into some other schemes or projects that's going to be devised by the state government or central government or something. So this project will always be the major project, and as and when we get chance, like smart city, we had Jan and Varam initially, smart city. Amrit is there, Amrit's project is happening. So such centrally or state assisted project, we can kind of collaborate with such projects and include this into that. Yeah, that's what normally we do.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to shift, since we are a little running out of time now, but I'm going to shift the question, is the challenges of movement building. How do your platforms really allow for that kind of movement building for water ecologies in the urban space? And how do you see the platforms that you all are part of responding to it and contributing to it?
Should I begin?
Sure. Short and sweet answers, please, if I may request, because we're running out of time.
Actually, like, see, the moment, like in the year 2002, like, the Kochi Municipal Corporation established this special purpose vehicle. The main idea was to get like the other, hitherto ignored two areas, that's environment and heritage, into the planning and development aspiration or aspect of the municipal corporation. Ever since, we've been influencing the council to include more kind of sustainable project that would have long-term benefit, and projects that are common good projects. So like we've been quite successful in doing that. And in 2002, if you really see the annual budgets of the policy document for a year for a municipal corporation, urban local government. So like we've now, like when you 2021 budget, you have more kind of such sustainable development project, heritage projects, and water conservation project, canal regeneration project. So it's like instead of like kind of municipal corporation doing like projects on our basis, we are incorporating all these ideas. While we get best practices across the world, we kind of include that in the municipal corporation statement that annual budget is slowly implemented.
Dr. Rajan, you're not very clear. I think
involved in this process.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Would anyone else like to go for it? Go for Gurmeet, specifically in the heritage. What have there been any solution giving? Like you asked the whole question of the absence of professionals who would give you solutions in the space of water. Have there been any success stories, etc., which you would like as solution providing, where platforms help you do that, like Ecologies, etc.?
You know, if I were to draw certain examples of the project where it was successful was in the case of Puri, when I approached, because I understood that the groundwater recharge requires to be done. They have those sweet water zones, but the pokhris are critical for the water, water levels, the groundwater levels. So I went and met the MLA, who was part of the city level advisory committee. And I told him, I said, if you were to agree to do desilting of these, because I went to the Jagaghars and I found that, in these Jagaghars, there could be 4 of these pokhris, one has water, the other 3 are depleted and all that. Why? All it needed was desilting. And I'd spoken to them and they said, if we take out the mitti and we put it at the base of the coconut trees, they had coconut trees there, they'll get better fruit, the water will come on its own and it'll work very well. And, they said, we use this water for not swimming, but kind of kasrat. Puri is known for its wrestling and they are really into bodybuilding and all that. So they said, the government gives us gyms and all that, those equipment. And we don't want that. And even showed it to us, the broken equipment. They said, we would rather our pokhris get fixed and we get the water in it and use it for our body, whatever, fitness and things like that. So I understood this whole cultural practice and ecology, and I went and met the MLA. And I said, if you were to agree, if we can do this. For them, it must have translated in his mind as a vote thing. You know, if there are 500 people who are members of this Jaga Ghar, another 500, another, this means a lot of goodwill. So it completely made sense to him. But these water bodies are not protected. So it doesn't, so we were able to desilt those many. Technical challenges on some front because, you know, the contractor itches to use concrete. He can't just think of desilting as a scale of the project. But that's when you then start looking for support from the town planning department or the government, because this must get into policy that these pokeries must be notified as protected water bodies. Now the movement bit, you know, nobody is going to walk the road, I mean, and start doing slogans, ke hamari pokriyan ko bachao. I mean, it's not possible for a professional to do activism of that nature. I mean, I would say that because my practice has always been activism oriented, but I don't see people in today's day and age think the truth.
Thank you.
So when you look at IUCN's work, I mean, what I'm saying is institutional platforms are needed where organizations like yourselves or other organizations need to create the institutional platform for communities and the scientific community to work together. And that's possibly how you can get to governance, you know.
Thank you. Thank you, Gurmeet. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, or rather run out of time. What I would do is try to sum up what has been a very heavy dosage of diverse presentations across different institutions and all, not just institutions, but also within the design and environment stream, different practices. So I think from that perspective, I think what has been the essence of today's session was to see how do different or diverse professionals come together or identify platforms for change making to happen in the urban space. Be it in terms of our first presentation today, which was NT Kochi, where a city took a stand to look at integrated development, where going to the second one, which was from Pune by Shailaja ji, how can a citizen participate in the larger program, create platforms for themselves, and be a part of a larger ecosystem. Third, we had Sara, who talked about how the online media connects. It's about reach, it's about network. How do you popularize and also identify youth working in the space, which ties a degree or series of different, I wouldn't say industries, but also professions. How do you really invest the future or the youth into the dialogue? And we ended with the place of past in the present, because it's because the river touches every from a traditional settlement to an indigenous settlement to an urban area. So how do we really link up the different narratives? And finally, there was one question which came up among a divergent of observations in the chat box, which was about how do we regulate the zones of, for example, from a coastal zone to a red-blue line, which has been demarcated already, or even a heritage boundary, which has been created. How do we really activate the government using our platforms that have been created to reach that? So it has been, I'm sure there are more observations and more conversations. The INHAF chat is open, please do write in, and I'm sure Kirti ji will sum it up at the end of this thing. I would like to close the panel with that one, as we've run out of time, 3 minutes overdue. But as Hari instructed me right at the beginning, that we have one more session planned on the 20th at 5 p.m. We have the water ecologies with the context of water sanitation, water supply and sanitation in the city. So I would like to close the panel with that. Thank you everybody for being here today. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions we take away from this session and see how we can network to answer them. I would like to invite Kirti ji and Hariharan ji to come on board and do the closing statement.
Thank you, Ajay. What a wonderful session once again. Kirti bhai, your notes.
Yes. Well, I think before I really come to formal thank you, and I really want to kind of thank everyone with the bottom of my heart. I also want to kind of come back on one or two things as someone who listened to this rich discussion for the last 2 hours. And this, you may look at this as a devil's advocate, but I must say this, and that is this, that when it comes to dealing with urban challenge, And when it comes to dealing with rivers in the urban context, I believe and believe very strongly that we tend to be escapist. We tend not to look at reality. We essentially are running away for what I think are the problems. Let me first touch upon in a half a minute the whole urban question and just take one part. We were 65 million people in cities in 1950 when India became independent. We would be 840 million people in our cities in 2050. We were 270 million people in 2010. We'll be 520 million people in cities. Question that we need to ask, are our cities ready to deal with just one particular aspect, the population growth? An answer is clearly no. And I think, and when you start looking at cities, you've got to look at water, you've got to look at environment, you've got to look at governance, you've got to look at housing, you've got to look at slums, everything. We are way behind problems, and we are doing very little. We are very symbolic in what we do. This is precisely what is happening to the river. Such wonderful presentations have been made. In a 2-hour discussion, I did not hear 2 words. I did not hear anyone mention Ganga Action Plan. I didn't hear anyone talk about Kumbh Mela. And both of this need to be looked into. The reason it requires to be looked into is this, and the fact is that so far rivers are concerned, we as people have done enormous damage to our river. And this has been a collective damage. And in order to correct this collective damage, we require collective action, we require collective restoration. We don't require technical solution for understanding. We require nothing less than people's movement to start even talking about correctives. Let me come specifically what I mean. I've been talking to people who are involved in this, and I was friend with Shiva Ramakrishna, who was first person in charge of Ganga Action Plan. And last year, I went and talked to some people who are looking at Ganga Action Plan. Question that one asked was this, that we're spending millions and millions of rupees in cleaning Ganga for the last 30 years, 35 years. We have not gone very far. What are we doing? We probably have a very good understanding of the problem, and therefore we are saying on 159 cities on the river, we're building sewage treatment plants, we're building toilets, we're building interceptions. Wonderful. Question you need to ask, which is not asked, is this. This is a country of people who believe and call Ganga Maya. 84% of the country's people are Hindus. And no Hindu wants to die without a drop of Ganga water in his mouth, because Ganga water is a passport to moksha. Now the question I need to ask, and this is the context of culture, this is the context of religious, this is the context of society, that if Ganga water is a passport to moksha, why have you done everything under your power to pollute Ganga river? If Ganga is Maya, why are you polluting the river? And therefore, while go on asking this question, go on building toilets, one of the most fundamental questions to ask is, why are we doing what are we doing? Is there a disconnect with our culture? Is there a disconnect with our religion? Is there a disconnect with our systems, our value systems? And unless we answer this question, we are not going to go very far. We may continue building toilets as long as you want to do this. And we have seen results in the last 30 years, what has happened to Ganga and what has happened to clean up Ganga. Let me come back to Kumbh Mela. And the reason I'm talking about Kumbh Mela also is a people's action for river, people's action related to religion, people's action related to culture. And which people? I believe 98% of the people who go to Kumbh Mela are the poor. No one invites them. No one pays for them. No one essentially ensures that they will get water or place to stay. Still, millions of people walk and go to Kumbh Mela. I don't know whether you know what is the statistics, but last Kumbh Mela, 60 million people congregated on Allahabad for the Snana. 60 million people. Now, if the 60 million people were to become agents of cleaning rivers, if this 60 million people were to kind of get the message, and once again, they're not going for anything else. They're not going for worldly things. They're going to get a passport to moksha, to nirvana. Now, this being the cultural heritage, this being the strength of people, this is the number in which people participate. Where is the leadership which is talking about galvanizing this force? Point I'm trying to make is this, and I think I'm not participating in the debate. This is the end of the debate, but point I'm trying to make is this, that we are talking about, I think, small little technical solutions. But we require very powerful people's movement, and this country is very capable of doing it. It requires leadership. It requires, target. It requires, I think, vision and perspective. How to do it, I think, is not something to talk about at this point of time, but it's exceedingly important that we look at this. We go beyond symbolism. We look at this larger people's movement part into clearing our rivers, because we've done enormous amount of damage. Every single city has destroyed river, and there is no other word. It's destruction is the only word. We have destroyed it. We have to recreate it. And therefore, everything else is very important. Nothing is less important. I'm not undervaluing anything, but I'm saying we have got to look at this people's movement part as something which is very, very important. Having said that, let me come back to, I think, my institutional responsibility to thank all of you. Thank you, Ajay, for this very thoughtful webinar. Discussions are very, very insightful. Many new ideas, very new projects, and I think many new processes have been talked about. And of course, thank you very much for managing this efficiently, effortlessly, and of course, purposefully. Let me also use this opportunity to kind of thank not only Ajay, but Kimya, Vikram, and others who, what I call a gang of 3 from Bombay, for doing this wonderful work in terms of putting the whole thing together and helping us do not only one, but I think a number of webinars that we're doing on the subject. Let me also take this opportunity to thank this very rich panel, which has given us a lot to think about and a lot to learn from, a lot to kind of take home and get inspired with. So my thanks are to Mrs. Sahil Sasidharan, to Dr. Rajan, Chedambath, Shailaja Deshpande, Dr. Sara, Ahmed. Dr. Sara, I live in Ahmedabad. One day we should get together. And Gurmeet, madam, thank you very much. It has been wonderful. I also wanted to kind of say, repeat again, even though it's been said, that we are not 3, but we essentially are running 4 webinars on water. We had one yesterday, we had one today. We would have gone to one on 20th, which is just looking at drinking water. And then we have one on 22nd, curated by Professor Rajan, which is on increasing urban water stress. And he says very beautifully, hiding behind climate change, that we are using that in order to kind of not to face the issues that we need to face. This 4-part series is extremely useful, because if you want our cities to be better, if we want our cities to be sustainable, if we want our cities without stress, if we want our cities without conflict and decay and emergencies, we need to tackle water issue as urgently, as fast, and as creatively as possible. We invite, I think, people for the next webinar, which is on 20th. Please come, help, and participate. Having said that, let me kind of end this, my thank you, by thanking our team, Studio INHAF, who are working very hard behind the screen, who have made all this possible. This is the 24th or the 25th webinar. We're going on for last 6 months since mid-June, and they're very young and they're doing tremendously interesting work. So thank you very much for Dr. Hariharan, Radhika, Shimul, Elika, Dhruti, Neeta, and everyone else. Very, very grateful for your time, for your contribution, for your learning. Please don't misunderstand me. I do not undervalue what is being said and discussed. It's hugely important, but there are larger questions. A larger question is this. I think, one of the problems with rivers, one of the problems with water, one of the problems with cities is this: time is not on our side. If within the next 30 years, India's urban population is going to be doubled, and if it takes 26 years to understand what, I think, Constitutional Amendment 73 and 74 is all about, something is terribly wrong with us. That is not the way to solve problems. That is not the way to create a new country. That is not the way to equip our cities to take this huge load which is coming. So it's essentially looking at the challenges and saying and reminding that these challenges are not easy. It's going to require a huge amount of effort. And I continue on saying that effort will have to come as much from communities, from people, from professionals, from civil society, as from the government. We've got to build this new partnership, and we've got to see that the new actors surface, and this entire series of webinars we are doing essentially is part of that game, trying to identify those change makers, trying to identify those people who have ideas, and create platforms so that they work together, and rivers and water is certainly part of it. So thank you very much for being, for your time, and for your contribution.
Thank you, Kirtiji.